fight cause I'm very nice. I practice that every night to get on this herd mic. You know I'm alert, right? You know that it ain't nothing to serve, right? And I be killing tracks to the earth like my birthright. I'm solid like sound money and you fools sound.
Welcome to 3 Count Commentaries. Today we're going to be talking about the biography of Jerry the King Lawler, which, if you watch the WWE biography on Jerry the King Lawler, It's Good to Be the King, if you watch that documentary, it's almost exactly the same thing. It's almost exactly the same. There's very little difference. Of course, quite a bit of it is spent on Memphis, quite a bit of it on Andy Kaufman. They spend a little bit more time on his WWF tenure in this biography. But as usual, we're trying to change things up a little bit. And of course, the major thing missing from this was, Jerry the King Lawler getting indicted for rape. That was a major thing that they missed. So we'll talk a little bit about that. But we all know the story of Memphis if you watch that biography. If you don't, it's a pretty short story. Jerry the King Lawler was a fan of Memphis wrestling. He had a talent for drawing cartoons. He used to draw cartoons of the wrestlers and send them to Lance Russell. Lance Russell passed it on to Jackie Fargo, who was the top guy at the time. Jerry the King Lawler would then be invited to draw pictures for the guys so they could sell them and stuff like that. And that's kind of how he got in contact with Jackie Fargo. And Jackie Fargo is the guy who brought him into the business. There it is. Short and sweet. Andy Kaufman situation will come a little bit later. But so, that's not to go through all of that. But here's the interesting thing that I always found very interesting about Jerry Lawler is he says that he's a child at heart. He says he had Peter Pan syndrome. He's got like a giant Superman in his house. He's got a Batmobile that he actually owns. Like that's insane. He owns a Batmobile. I had no idea. I had no idea he owned a Batmobile, but he does. So, as a guy who's a comic book nerd, Jerry Lawler being a comic book nerd, he's a different level. Way beyond me. We learned, because I didn't know this before, that he actually kept reference and joke books that he, collected them to maintain content as he did commentary. As he explains in this biography, it's harder to do commentary because you're on for 3 hours rather than wrestling. He says he actually prefers to wrestle because when you're wrestling, you just do your match and then you go to the back. When you do commentary, you have to sit there all night and you have to be entertaining for 3 straight hours. And I really didn't think about that. Really hadn't considered that until he said it. We should give commentators more credit. And they touched on the puppies and how excited he would be for the female wrestlers. The cat was in his biography. She said it made it easy for her because, not just because it was, that's his wife, but, it's difficult doing the things that they were doing. But him being so humorous and excited about it actually made it easier for her. So that's an interesting way of looking at things too, I think. Why not? Why not take that? Of course, he talked about Memphis being the very first developmental program. It's a little smudged because that would be the USWA. And while Jerry Lawler did own some of that promotion, it's kind of sketchy because he did have business partners. And you would think the USWA would be something they would put on the network. But then again, you think they would put Smoky Mountain on the network. They don't. I mean, there's no telling. But he's not wrong. Randy Hales ran the very first WWE developmental program. He was the owner of the TV show at the time. Jerry Lawler had already bailed out, if I remember correctly. I did a video on Memphis Power Pro Wrestling when I did the WWE developmental series. So you can just take a look at that. And I don't remember off the top of my head, but I'm pretty sure Randy Hales had taken over after Jerry Lawler and those other guys had bailed out already. So I don't think it was Jerry Lawler specifically that was running a developmental system. I think it was Randy Hales that was running a developmental system in Memphis. And Jerry Lawler was basically working with him every now and again at that time. It was a lot of very interesting things that occurred. You learned that in the 2010s, Jerry Lawler was in his 60s, and this is finally, the only time he's ever had a WWE Championship match is when he wrestled The Miz, and he was in his 60s at that point in time. The only time he ever wrestled at WrestleMania, he was in his 60s, and he wrestled Michael Cole, and that also didn't occur to me. You would think that Jerry Lawler, as long as he was around, he would have wrestled at WrestleMania before, but no, he didn't. Like, it's not like it's missing, but it's something that he has always been so ubiquitous at WrestleMania that you really wouldn't think that he had his very first match, his very first WrestleMania match, as long as he was in that company, until, 2011, when they were doing the stupid heel Michael Cole gimmick. And for him to have been in his 60s at the time is pretty crazy. It's pretty crazy. And for him to have that under his belt, at a time where everybody else has been retiring, says a lot about who Jerry Lawler is. And he still wrestles currently, even though he had that heart attack in 2012, and he had, I think he had a stroke. He's had 2 strokes now, if I remember correctly. He had a stroke in 2023 as well. So he's unkillable. He just can't take down Jerry Lawler. He won't go away. So I think we've beat around the bush enough. I mean, everybody knows the story of Jerry the King Lawler. 1992, 1993. Jerry Lawler is indicted for rape. This is a pretty crazy story. Let's read some of it from Pro Wrestling Illustrated, as they covered it at the time when it happened. I just want to read a bit of that because it's an interesting story that Jerry Lawler is, he's not running away from it, but it's weird that he would retweet stories like this back in 2017. So here it goes. So Jerry the King Lawler faces a maximum of 41 years in prison if convicted of charges of rape and sodomy involving a 13-year-old girl in Louisville, Kentucky. Lawler vehemently denies the allegations. Lawler is scheduled to be arraigned on November 22nd at the Jefferson County Courthouse to answer the charges brought against him by a Jefferson County grand jury on November the 12th. He faces 3 counts of second-degree sodomy, 1 count of second-degree rape, and 1 count of harassing a witness. Oh my God. Whew. Lawler told Sports Wrestling Illustrated some allegations about me by some individual are completely and totally false, and I will prove them false if need be in a court of law. I will devote my full attention to proving these allegations false. Oh boy. So yeah, that's what he was accused of. So they continue. In addition, Lawler is charged with unlawful conduct intended to dissuade a person who he believes may be called as a witness from cooperating. Lawler faces 5 to 10 years in jail for each of the second-degree rape and sodomy charges, which are Class C felonies. Harassment is a Class A misdemeanor and punishable by up to 12 months in jail. Lawler could spend up to 41 years in prison if convicted of all charges. But because he would be a first-time offender, Lawler will probably receive a far briefer sentence and probation. No formal arrest was made. Lawler's problems might not be restricted to Kentucky. Another investigation involving Lawler is taking place in Clark County, Indiana. Detective Dave Crump told the Commercial Appeal his office is investigating charges against Lawler and another professional wrestler. So he was basically 2 different states, got similar charges, 2 different girls. Nothing came out of either case, of course. Clearly, he's still working. He's still doing everything. But he did find, David Bixen's fan, let's say, found a very interesting letter that was written by Jerry the King Lawler. It was written, well, we're assuming it was written by Jerry Lawler because it's signed by Jerry Lawler. We're assuming that he wrote it. And he sent, this is one of his things that he sent to the police. He sent a packet of affidavits to the police, basically people talking about his good character and stuff like this. So he wrote one on his own behalf, and it's pretty lengthy. It's 3 pages or something like that. It is the middle page, the second page, that I find to be the most interesting and the most noteworthy, that the most worth talking about. Lawler writes, quote, I feel if you did a background search on me, you would find that I have always tried to treat people with respect, from the smallest of the wrestling fans to mayors and senators, and I think they in turn would tell you that my word is good. I also know that if you did a background search on the 2 girls in question, you would find that one of them is having a sexual relationship with the other one's brother, that their mothers are both aware of this relationship, that she smokes, drinks, has been suspended from school several times, that she brags publicly about having numerous sex partners, was claimed to be pregnant, and they exposed herself publicly and committed lesbian acts in front of witnesses. The other girl is currently involved in a sexual relationship with a 40-year-old neighbor whom she babysits for, and also has caught having sex with a black man. Her mother is aware of both of these situations and admits that her daughter lies to her all the time. The girl also claims to have had sex with, quote, several wrestlers. She has also bragged in public about having numerous sex partners, and she has committed lesbian acts in front of witnesses. You will also find that while they are saying they had sex with me in May and June, nothing was said about it until after they both had run in with my girlfriend at Louisville Gardens, in which they both cursed and shouted obscenities at her until she finally grabbed one of the girls by the arm and scolded her. So if you're in the Googling business and you Google this letter, you'll see that Bixenspan focused so much on him talking about the young girls being whores or sluts or whatever, but really he's talking about their character. Now, again, whenever we're talking about these types of cases, Jerry Lawler is saying that these people are liars, that they're lying about him. That's apparently the story. The story is that, the girls were bragging about having sex with various wrestlers and his name came up. Apparently somebody overheard this, believed it, and then went to the law about it. And that's how he got jammed up in all this stuff. So what he's saying is they do this stuff all the time. They are sexually charged teenage girls who go around bragging about having sex. And they sometimes they actually do have sex with these people. And these things, come up. So he's speaking to their character mostly, not to, racial stuff like, having sex with a black man. Like, why does that matter? But that's what he's trying to argue. And it doesn't make much sense. It's kind of silly. People, of course, they think he got away on a technicality. It's like he got charged with rape in 2 different states. Like, how did this? That's not a technicality, brother. Like, I'm sorry, and it wasn't even that, oh no, he got away with it because it's Memphis and he's, the king of Memphis. No, this was in Louisville, Kentucky, and the other one was in Evansville, Indiana. So while they're in the same territory, wrestling territory, he has no stroke in Indiana and no stroke in Kentucky. Memphis, maybe. You might be able to get away with it there, but Kentucky, Indiana, probably not. I think sometimes people just want people to be guilty. But, of course, this was a big thing that was not mentioned in the biography, which, it shouldn't have been, considering he wasn't convicted of anything. He was suspended for quite a while, but then he ended up coming back shortly after this was all over. He's also suspended for domestic violence in like 2016 or 2017, which I forgot all about. He got into a fight with his 27-year-old girlfriend. He was 66 at the time. His girlfriend was 27. And they got into a fist fight while drunk in the house. It was crazy. Jerry Lawler's life is insane. All right? Insanity. But he's a hell of a pro wrestler. And I watched this documentary the same day that Andy Kaufman was being announced to the WWE Hall of Fame. And I got to tell you, the Kaufman-Lawler stuff never gets old. It's always fun, no matter how many times I've heard that story, and I've heard that story 100 million times. It never stops being interesting. It never stops being fun or funny, because of the performances of both guys involved. Despite the fact that Jerry Lawler lived a pretty sketchy life with the accusations of rape and domestic violence and all this kind of stuff, you got to say that the guy has lived a full life, and he's done a hell of a lot. Unfortunately, his wrestling career has mostly been in Memphis, and he hasn't done a lot in the WWF. He didn't win any championships. He had one feud, and then he got hit with the rape case, and that kind of derailed his entire career. And he was kind of set. Well, he was also 40-something when he was brought into the WWE, so there that goes. So one thing that I think they missed that I would have liked for them to go into, and I'm not sure if they went into it in the WWE documentary or not, but his run for mayor in Memphis, and I think it was 1999 when he ran for mayor. I would have wanted to know more about that. I think that would have been interesting. Because Jerry Lawler led such a very, very unique life. From the highest of the highs to the lowest of the lows. I mean, legit. You can't get much lower than, mugshot for domestic violence or being accused of rape. But he's come out of it incredibly positive, and most of the people have forgotten a lot of this stuff, and it's hard for some people to believe it, more than others, but it's just, he's lived a very interesting life. But it's crazy that these biographies seem to be only limited to, hey, he wrestled in Memphis, and hey, he wrestled Andy Kaufman, and he yelled puppies a lot. And then he had a heart attack on TV. It's like, oh, yeah, he did more than that. Can we talk about more stuff than this? But WWE, the respect they have for Jerry Lawler is pretty high, but it's also kind of minimal. But what do you guys think? Like, share, subscribe. I'll talk to you guys later, man. Peace.
Old non-aggression. Once that lesson sets in, you'll see a session. But you got an affection for no progression, regression. The